It is our honor to welcome two experts in this, Mr. Carsten Nicolai and Ryuichi Sakamoto. Please give them a warm welcome. It's still on. Now, both of you both have a mic, do you? Yeah. Oh, great. Both of you have been in the city quite a lot. You have lived here, if I understand correctly. Do you feel the city sounds different when it rains? Yes.
Yeah.
When do you like the sound of the city the best?
The city of New York, or
For starters, yeah. Seeing that we're here now.
well, I used to like the radio communication in the taxi between the taxi driver and the station. But nowadays, they've been using cell phones, so it's not very interesting anymore. But it used to be. I love that. I loved that. Yeah.
Yeah, all the different languages that they used and
Languages also, but also most of the times it's been feeding back between the drivers and station. So it sounds very, very kind of tropical to me, because a lot of delays between the conversations.
and those create other new spaces for other sounds to get into, right? I have the feeling that Carsten, who, by the way, had a lecture here before that is very recommendable, you should go and look that up on the video. You kind of like those spaces in between, and when there's certain structures emerging that you don't really expect.
Yeah, of course. I mean, New York is a machine. Huh? The city is really a machine, because of the density and so on. And of course, you can always find moments where you think like, wow, what a great sound, what a great mix of different things, and subway or ventilation or machinery going all night, or there's always something, of course.
That reminds me that very unique sound of New York is the sound of air conditioning, AC. So probably, I actually, long time ago, I recorded it in a very late night, like 2 or 3 in the morning. Just accidentally, one of my friends was staying very close to Times Square, so I went there and then opened the window and recorded the sound of the city. And of course, because it's early morning, it's less car traffic, and I found that the very unique characteristic sound is AC. We had a blackout for almost 2 days some years ago, right? And of course the AC was all gone, and it was totally silent. I love that.
Now, your hometown of Tokyo actually has a lot of ACs as well. Do they sound different?
American AC is much louder. I mean, probably the Japanese people are very keen to minimize things, like TVs or cars or anything, minimize. Also, they'll make things quieter. So, even one of the Japanese AC is called quietness or something. They love it. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's one of the things that visitors always strike about, especially Tokyo or other metropolitan Japanese areas, how there's this vast density and this vast technology, and still you find anywhere you look a little place which is maybe 5 inches wide, and there's a little tree growing there, and a little oasis of silence.
Do you think so?
I think each city is a little bit different. I mean, especially when you talk about the difference between Japan and New York, Tokyo, New York. For instance, I was very surprised that in Tokyo it was so quiet when I was the first time in Tokyo in the morning, Sunday morning. It was so really quiet, and I think I never remember any quiet day in New York. I mean, it's never quiet.
Berlin is very quiet too.
Yeah, very quiet too. Yeah.
But you were not born in Berlin, right?
No.
Was Chemnitz even
Karl Marx Stadt.
when you were
Still
born? It
Karl
was still
Marx.
Karl Marx. Yeah.
Yes.
It's still Marx there.
Yes. Yeah.
The center of the city.
Yeah. The former East Germany.
Is it 8 meter high?
I think it's
so huge.
With the base is a little bit higher than 8 even. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. The city was called after Karl Marx. They just named it, and now it's basically got the old name back. But I really love that I basically have in my passport a birthplace that doesn't exist anymore. It's quite interesting, I think.
So you're a post-place person?
I don't know if I'm a post-place person, but I like the idea that if somebody would ask me what is this city, and I say it doesn't exist anymore, the name. Yeah.
So what's the sound of that city that doesn't exist anymore? What do you think about when you think back of that?
I think what I remember, it was probably, I mean, it's not really exciting for me, or was not so exciting about the sound, because probably I never gave it so much attention. I think the first time I gave it attention when I was start traveling, that I realized every place is really different. Then you realize, okay, then you get aware of the differences of the places and so on. But it's a quieter place. It's a smaller city, but it's an industrial city. So it was. I remember one very specific thing, and the other day we talked about it with my friend Olaf, where we were running the label with. We had that we grow up in a pretty much still post-World War II situation, because every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. The sirens started going, like in war times. Actually, it was a test in the middle of the day.
Wow!
And everybody was sure. Okay, this is the test at Wednesday at 1. But if it was not Wednesday 1 o'clock, it's okay. Something was really. But this to grow up. I mean, it's probably something like when you grow up next to a church where the bell is going. But this was a part of our routine, and somehow maybe I remember this very clearly. For instance, this is very clear sonic memory. Yeah.
Was it very loud?
Very loud.
Very loud.
Very loud.
Wow.
Yeah.
The whole city.
The whole city, and it's not only one. It was maybe 300-400 all over the city going at the same time. Of course, they all been different pitch. So sonically it was very interesting, but of course it was a bit scary too in the same time, because you never know, is it one, or is it something happen, or whatever.
I'm really curious, because in Western Germany that same drill happened, but on a Saturday at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
So but it was the same thing, and obviously a lot of the sirens were older. I wonder whether they had different pitches on purpose.
Yeah. I think we grew up in basically the Cold War situation on different sides. So the strategies to scare the people been so very similar. I guess so. Yeah.
But that's the sound that you remember. What kind of music do you actually remember in?
I think, as you mentioned, the taxi radio, for instance, this is a story I really like to tell with, because when we grew up in East Germany, we had to, in order to find the right radio station, to listen to the right music, we always tuned in radio station from, let's say, from the UK or from western part of Germany. And depending on how strong the signal was, we could sometimes receive it or not. It was depending on weather, but it sometimes was depending as well on this frequency being blocked sometimes by military frequencies. And I remember that, okay, I just have to wait until they stop, and then the radio show will come up. And I remember sitting in front of the radio and listen to number stations, like somebody counting Russian numbers for 2 hours. And in a way, I have to say, after a while, I was thinking, oh, it's really, what is behind these numbers? So it's a kind of code, obviously. They're transmitting whatever you don't know. You're making up your mind. And I like that, and I think it left a little bit a trace of the way how, for instance, you use voice in tracks, or this kind of certain language as code. Yeah.
How old were you?
Yeah, this was basically from when you start listening to radio, 12, 13 to the end of the until the 90s. So it was still there. Yeah.
I guess there's something about the musical quality of a foreign language that a lot of us experience, for example, when they start learning martial arts and they go and train for a kata in the karate lessons, and then all of a sudden you really get into the rhythm of your teacher counting you in, and it almost becomes a musical bit. How does that feel for when you learn? I mean, what was the first foreign language counting that you remember?
Well, after the war in Japan, probably, as a kid, we listened to music from the West more than Japanese domestic music. Maybe 80% of music we listened was Western, or American or European. So we used to listen to those music without understanding those languages, what he would sing. So probably even now, Japanese people are really used to listen to music from the West without understanding. So that means they listen to music just as a sound, without understanding the meaning.
Can you remember how your first active memories of listening to music?
Probably I was 3 years old, and the first music I loved was it's a bit embarrassing, but it's Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto.
Why would you be embarrassed about that?
Because it's very sentimental and romantic.
Yeah, but I guess we're all grown-ups. It's very all right.
Probably, yes. That was my very first memory.
And how did you get in touch with that?
Well, one of my uncles was, the record collector. So I often visited his room and picked up some vinyls, and I liked it. Yeah.
So that's probably parental advice for everyone at home, that make sure you pick a good uncle or godfather that has a record collection.
Probably, yeah.
Carsten, did you have a record collection in your family as well?
I think from my parents' side was not much happening from the music, but my brother and myself, we started a record collection, and it's really, I think we really been proud of every record we listened to, and we've been very careful about the 15 records we had or something. Yeah.
What did you listen?
I mean, the situation was, you could listen to classical music quite easily. You could listen to jazz music quite easy at the time when we grew up. Specifically, free jazz was a big movement. And everything what was, of course, coming from the West, like more avant-garde stuff and so on, you had to mostly to tape.
But did the authorities say free jazz as bourgeois music?
No, they've been absolutely open about it. Actually,
Really?
they really gave it a big. There was a big scene, actually, East German scene, and there was a big exchange between the East and the West already in the early '80s, and some of the artists from the East could even travel to the West. It was not so hermetic as you would imagine it.
Yeah, there's this strange thing that a lot of the great jazz musicians toured East Germany
Yeah.
easier than the West because there was government funding for it.
Yeah, and there was, for instance, a situation that Laurie Anderson was considered as jazz, and so she came to a jazz festival. Yes, and of course this was totally, like, for us was the highlight, and we all went to this jazz festival to see her.
I know she was your heroine.
Yeah.
But
And,
I heard
Yeah,
the composer Ligeti.
yeah.
At that time, he was, it was forbidden to write chromatically. So when he went abroad, I mean, to Berlin, he passionately wrote, the music chromatically. That became atmosphere, his early work. So he was forbidden.
Yeah, Ligeti. I mean, Ligeti is a little bit a strange case because Ligeti, the fame of Ligeti came with 2001, more or less, like through that. But we know Ligeti by this time.
The country, Hungary, probably.
Yeah, because we traveled to Hungary, and we bought records from Hungary a lot, from Poland, Yugoslavia a little bit, and each of the countries had a little bit a different release policy, being a little bit more open in this way. Like Yugoslavia was very open to pop records, for instance. On the other hand, for instance, there was a big Polish and Czech movement in electronic music, what we don't know yet. It was really big. Everything electronically was very, very open, for instance, in East Germany.
I see. So even in the East, but each country has a different situation.
I remember I saw Tangerine Dream live 2 times in East Germany. They came to my city.
Wow.
Yeah, they toured. Yeah.
Well, they're not that chromatical.
No, sorry, this is a little bit different topic. But for instance, Hungary was famous for releasing one of the only Steve Reich record, for instance, and then they had really weird avant-garde composers from the, let's say, chromatic scale more coming and so on, and there was a small record label from the East, Eterna. They've been specifically interested in more the, let's say, modern classical music. Yeah.
Now, Japan was sitting in a very particular position in all this political climate. Were you able to buy YMO records?
Of course not. No. But we know about them and we taped it. I mean, we're sitting in front of the radio and taped everything. And or somebody had a record and then you borrowed your record, one of your 15 records, you borrowed to him, and then you borrowed one of, so there was a little distribution system existing. Yeah.
Can you remember which YMO records you liked?
I think, you know, because I taped it, I don't have this visual memory of the covers anymore, because you have everything on tape and sometimes only one track. But I remember, yeah, of course, the classics and yeah, and then the later stuff, what was more recent released when I was younger. I mean, YMO was for me already. I was already, when I started listening, there'd been quite a lot of YMO records already released. Yeah.
How about Kraftwerk? Did you like Kraftwerk?
I didn't like Kraftwerk in the time.
You didn't like it?
No, because it was too poppy for me.
But you quite liked them, right? You quite liked them.
Yeah.
What did you like about them? They were not too poppy for you.
Because when I found Kraftwerk was very early. Like they were one of the German rock in the 70s.
When they were still a rock band and
Yes,
before
yes.
Autobahn and all. Yeah.
Long hair, handmade oscillators, etc. They were next to like Noy and Kahn. So I didn't like Tangerine Dream so much, but Kraftwerk is much better. Noy was very strong, I think. So yeah, I liked it, Kraftwerk.
Yeah, for me, Kraftwerk, for instance, I understood the first time when I was invited in Sonar, and they played there, and then I was really seeing them for the first time live, and then that changed everything.
You became a fan.
Absolutely. I was so... even people told me, it's not like in the old days, what you're going to see, forget about it. We're not going tonight to see the concert. And I was standing there and was, fuck, this is a piece of art. I've never seen people being so, like, visually was so well done, conceptually with the robots. And then I was thinking, wow, this is so strong. So I never experienced that impact of a live. And since then, I started going to live shows again, actually, to see live things. Yeah.
The Kraftwerk came to Japan to perform first time in 1981, and 3 of us, YMO, went to see it, and we met 4 of them, 4 still original members of Kraftwerk, and 3 from YMO, and we all went to a disco after the show. Florian and Ralph started dancing on the floor. Yes, like this kind of dancing.
German style.
Yeah, German style. So that was 81. Then they had 8-day or 12-day series of concerts at the MoMA, right? 2 years ago. Yep. I went to see 2 of them, and I saw Ralph again. First time in 29 years.
Did his dancing improve in the meantime?
Well, we didn't go to a disco this time, so I didn't see his dancing.
And I mean, probably to give a context, because most of us were not born then even, and I mean some of us, but that's hard to grey. But you were not just anyone meeting them right there. I mean, if that was 81, that was after the big tour where you played the Budokan and all, right?
Yes.
Would it be alright if we played like 1 or 2 minutes of the Budokan video?
Yeah.
Yeah? I guess that deserves a little bit of a clap. Now, people have been to various events in the past few days, including an event called the United States of Bass. And when you just hear the opening bars of that song, especially in this city, this has resonated in a great deal, and genres like hip-hop or a lot of the dance music that came later probably would not really exist with that sort of stuff. When did you first realize that people are taking what you have done there and doing something else with it?
I don't know. I guess first person who covered our music was actually Michael Jackson. Around that time. So
which song?
Behind the Mask. So that track was going to on the Thriller album, but so we got a letter from Michael's office, and it said we covered your song Behind the Mask, and we're going to put on a new album, and we need 100% of writer's share. It said. Well, so we wanted to listen to what the music was like, and of course, they said that we cannot ship, we cannot bring it to you, we cannot let you hear. So, without listening, without hearing the music, I cannot judge 100% of writer's share is fair or not. So we refused it. Shoot. If we said yes, probably I would have 10 different houses in all over the world.
But I somehow have the feeling you're doing all right anyway.
Then next one who covered, actually it's the same song, Behind the Mask, was Eric Clapton. But it's not, well, it's a different way, like hip-hop guys have used some elements from our music. Also, actually, I met Afrika Bambaataa in the 80s, and he said YMO and Kraftwerk were two biggest inspirations for hip hop. He was a big guy, but very, very shy, and he asked me to write down my autograph. Anyway, so probably he made some big connection between hip hop culture and techno music, maybe. What do you think?
Yeah, he might have had a hand or two in that, yes. Just so. Yeah, and I mean, there's some stuff that maybe we play at the very end when everyone's getting out, but what I found most fascinating when you look at the entire video, which you will obviously find online, is that knowing how much technology we these days buy from Japan, and especially the vintage stuff, hardly anything you see on there is actually Japanese. There's a lot of, you see Buchler systems, you see ARPs, what else is there? An Oberheim.
A Prophet.
Sequential circuits,
Yeah.
so it's like...
Oberheim, Polymoog, maybe.
So did the Japanese music instrument industry not exist to that degree yet, or why were you more using these kind of machines?
It existed at the time, of course.
Yeah.
We used the Roland Micro 8,
MC8?
MC8.
Yeah.
That was a very center of creative music for us. But
I think he also used the Korg sequencer, which is a Japanese company as well.
yes, Korg.
Yeah.
Then maybe a few years later, DX7 came out,
Yeah.
and we really loved it. And vocoder was also maybe a Korg or Roland.
The striking thing I found when you look at the setup as such is with the Korg and the MC8 that you have like 2 different sequences in the whole thing. So how did that work? How did you make all these different sequences gel as a band in talking to each other?
Well, up until the second generation MC4 came out, actually MC8 didn't have a memory. So during the show, our programmer had to program next song here, and next one after that, the second one. If someone hit the cable or something to turn off the MC8, that's it.
Concert over.
Over.
So how many units did you then bring on the show?
Well, we used 2 MC8, and probably we had 2 as a backup. That's it.
Carsten, I mean, there's been companies like the VEB Vermona at the time, but can you remember when you recalled your first electronic instrument?
I was not actually actively making music in the East German times. I only know from my friends Olaf and Frank, who had an electronic band. And they, of course, been very much interested to, for instance, get a C, Commodore 64, this kind of thing, or in this time, this would be the high. But it was simply not affordable for us. I mean, it was simply much too expensive. I mean, you needed to put all your money away for at least 3 or 4 years in order to buy one of that instruments. So it was really kind of, by the time you maybe had the money collected, other instruments being available, and then you had, but generally, I think a few of these machines, I mean, Vermona was, but I think there was a drum machine from Vermona existing. There was some synths, but not super exciting, let's say, for us. Yeah, so.
What did excite you?
I mean, what we made music with was very, very basic equipment. Let's say, for instance, what I got much more excited was to play with cassette loops, building little tape loops, and that was very easy and affordable. And taking radio shortwave signals as signal producer, for instance, what I still do until today was a great inspiration or something. So you had already some, like the radio and the tape, the same equipment what we recorded with music, we used as well to start making music with. Yeah. So this was a very simple, basic way of sketching things out. Yeah.
And what of those techniques do you still apply when you do stuff today?
Yeah, sure. The idea of the loops, for instance, was a very driving force for me for a long time.
Did you do that with 2 tape decks or physically were cutting the tape?
In the beginning, I was really making my own cassettes, and then like only cassette I used. I not even had big loops or something running. And then later. And in the moment the computer came, of course, you did it with the computer, but there was a sampler in between, like when we could afford a sampler. Yeah.
Your job at the time was being a gardener before you studied, right?
I worked as a gardener for 1 year, yeah.
And then you studied what?
Architecture, specialized landscape design. Yeah.
Now, obviously, if you look at the way someone can construct music, there can be some sort of parallel, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think the way how I started making music was very architecturally, I would say. I was not so much interested, for instance, in melodies, or was more like really, let's say, I was not interested in the facade of the building. I was rather in the construction, like I was much more interested in the rhythmic parts of a track rather than the writing a song or something. Yeah.
You're not like you agree a lot.
Well, that's the most interesting part of this collaboration, because we had such a different backgrounds. I'm fully classically trained since I was a kid, and he's not. He's thinking of creating music is much more, to me, more mathematical, based on numbers. Doesn't have to be Russian number, but
But one could argue that classical music is very numerical and logical as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
in a way.
But we had in the there was, for instance, in the beginning, I was everything calculating because I worked with loops in milliseconds, and I didn't know what kind of bar system I'm using. And then Ryuichi came, this is a 5/4. So okay, so I didn't know what. Okay, and so I really. Basically, then what you learn is that there's a notation system. There's the classical notation system. What I was is a language, what I was not aware of, and I basically, when Ryuichi talked about okay, this is an A, and I was saying this is 220 hertz actually. I mean, and then I was because we talk about the same thing,
Yes.
but there was a problem of translation. Yeah, lost in translation.
Yeah, lost in translation. Yeah, I'm much more traditional in that sense, but also because I'm very classically trained, but my curiosity is so huge, and I always want to forget what I've learned. So that's why I got like his music and new kind of music. So it's to me it's very inspiring to look at how he creates music and how he designs sound and music.
But that's a very tricky situation, because with that curiosity, you learned a lot about very different cultures, very different types of music. So there's a lot to forget for you as well, like all the time. Like, how do you manage that process?
I have to forget a lot, but I'm good at that. Yeah.
Now, like with every couple, there's the question: how did the two of you meet actually?
It was probably late 90s, 98 or 99. Probably when you had a performance first performance in Tokyo.
My first performance in Tokyo.
Yeah. Actually, Ryoji Ikeda introduced us.
Yeah.
Who is a really brilliant both visual and sound artist as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. He was on this day performing with me, and then Ryoji came to me after the concert. Because we met as well and became really good friends, because I was pushing the sound guys to put a bigger PA inside, and he really loved that I was so hard fighting for the bigger PA. And so we became kind of good friends, and then he said after the show, hey, you have time, come with me. And then I want to introduce you to some of my friends. And then that's how we met. Yeah.
But that was like 3 or 4 years before your first actual release, at least.
Yeah,
so
at least.
What happened in the 4 years of dating then?
Well, yeah, around that time, I was on a totally different project. It's a covering music of Antonio Carlos Jobim with the Brazilian musicians. We actually went into Jobim's house in Rio de Janeiro, and we even used his own piano to record, and we covered some, his music, and then we wanted to make a remix, and I asked him to remix one of our tracks. So he remixed Jobin's music, bossa nova music. It was strange, and the Brazilians didn't like it, and I loved it. So
let me just see, because then again, it might not be too instrumental for what we're talking about now, but we could have played some. Okay, what was the first bit that you actually worked together on?
I think around the same time I did a remix. Ryuichi was sending me a lot of material. I think you sent me like 1 hour of material.
piano improvisation.
Yeah, not only there was a little piano piece inside too, but a lot of electronic. And then I really picked only the piano.
Mm.
And I made, I think that's one of the first tracks what I released later on the first album. And I sent back, and Ryuichi was saying, "Oh, nice, here's another sketch." And then I sent this back too after a while. "Oh yeah, I sent you another sketch." And then I think on some point I realized, okay, this is like 1 hour, like, it's not like it's 40, 50 minutes of music done already. So, but I simply was too shy to ask what can we do with this kind of, so I not wanted to
Compose.
I was just waiting and was thinking, and then on some point, because we had a label, Raster Noto, and I said, I have to ask now. And I wrote Ryuichi an email and say, "Do you mind me putting this out?" And they said, "Yeah, of course." And that's basically then, that was maybe a process of 2 years, sending material back and forth, and there was a lot of time in between to listen to what we did. So it was not, for me, it was not very new material, but I really enjoyed working with this kind of combination of this very pure electronic music and this very beautiful Satie-esque, simple piano.
Shall we listen to some of that so people get a better idea?
Mm. I need your subwoofers.
I'm not really sure whether they qualify as hand luggage, but but they can be fun, and they sound even better when you sit over there. But the aircon fan is not part of the track, right?
Yeah, it's a nice resonance. Yeah.
So, if I understood it correctly, you sent sketches over, then you worked on it. But then you want to perform those as well. How do you communicate that process of how to perform this thing in a live environment?
I think for the piano was really clear. I mean, the piano, Ryuichi is very specific about the piano, and he has his own piano. There was one in London. So we used this one. But the other part was when I produced this kind of stuff, I had a lot of time basically, right? And one of the main elements of this music was that I used always all these little parts you hear. This is always the decays of the piano fading out into the room, or I loved to use the parts where the piano was still there but almost disappearing in the space, like this being the samples I worked with. And there was another thing, from that decays, I always extended the sound with sine wave frequencies, that they become kind of longer even, I didn't know how to do that in live. It would be impossible because this was in the studio was a very long process to find a frequency, to calculate the frequencies. But I worked with my studio, and I have a brilliant programmer in the studio. We wrote a program doing this in real time then, and this was already, let's say, and then was the idea to even to sequence that in real time. There was a sequencer as well. So I needed, for my part of side, I needed to recreate the instruments who could do it in a live context. So, yeah.
Well, my part is very easy. I just need to learn what I improvised. Well, because this music is all based on my improvisations, without any music. So I have to remember what I played. That's it.
How much of that is actually pre-recorded and how much does happen there? Because when you see the show, you actually communicate quite a lot with looking at each other, and it seems like you have your own little in-jokes going on at times.
I use Live Ableton, so it's pretty easy to have little scenes, and then we have cues. We know the cues. Like I know, okay, this is the cue for this, and sometimes I have to smile because Ryuichi tries something totally out, and I think, oh, interesting.
So it's flexible. Each section can be flexible. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. Depends on our feeling.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few songs we never perform the same, for instance, and there are some songs what makes the most fun, I think, for us, where we don't have any. We just know approximately what it will be like, but it's always different. Yeah.
And you do control the visuals as well, right?
Not anymore. We have now. In the beginning, I did in the first tour, but I realized that it's basically a little bit too difficult to control the visuals and at the same time do the music. So now we have somebody in the back controlling the visuals coming in, going out, and so on. And
because that's something that's really striking for everyone that's mostly working in Ableton, and like how to take that show and make it something more entertaining than just some person checking their emails and standing there with a laptop.
I mean, Live Ableton is fantastic in the moment because of this extension with Max MSP. So you can basically add a lot of little missing details, what you sometimes miss or whatever. But this is one thing. But the other thing is, I still have the little bit analog gear with me. The visual connection, actually, we have two driving forces. One is actually Ryuichi's piano,
and also MIDI.
But can basically give all the MIDI information he's playing. It's a synth clavier. It's a special piano, no, I think. So we're using that information. So whatever Ryuichi is playing on the piano gives information to the visual computer, and as well to me sometimes. But I'm getting the sound in from Ryuichi, but in the same time the visual computer gets the sound in, so I can use it to process it, for instance, and the visual computer can analyze it and creating graphical patterns depending on each song. Yeah.
You said that you are really particular about your piano. What piano are you actually using?
Actually, my piano is Yamaha.
And how does that work in... There's this one show where you have more than one piano on a stage. How does that work?
It's not... well, I sometimes use two pianos, but not for our collaboration.
I know for a different show, but it's something where I guess everyone in this room that has seen it is like, how does it work?
Well, yes, I have had some concerts with the two pianos, two MIDI pianos, and one is programmed. Well, actually, I played it and fixed it, programmed, and then the other piano I just play live. So it's basically played by both by myself, but so it's a kind of a self duo.
But do you program the sequences on the other piano beforehand, or
beforehand?
Do you just,
of course.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
and then you just
but
trigger
it's
them.
played. No. The piano can actually record what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you played at the piece. Yeah.
So it's like a duet, but because I know music, so I like piano A, piano B, like same as a live duo concert. I played the second piano, and I played the other piano live. That's it.
And can you control it from your main piano? Like, do you trigger certain sequences, or?
No. No.
Okay. So it just runs and you follow it. Okay.
Of course, it could. It's possible, but it's possible. But
have you ever? I mean, there's something about the power of a big acoustic instrument. Like anyone who's ever seen, like a Mahler symphony, and when you have 8 upright basses, it's one of the most powerful things you probably have heard. Have you ever thought of extending that 2-piano show to a bigger thing?
Actually, I once arranged one of my music for 8 pianos, and I really wanted to realize that music by just lining 8 pianos, 8 MIDI pianos, but even Yamaha Japan didn't have that much of the MIDI pianos, so we only could get 2 or 3 MIDI pianos at the same time, unfortunately.
I see a light bulb.
Yeah. It could be gorgeous, no?
I think we need to talk later. Yeah. We need to find the other 5. Yeah. Probably for those of you who have not seen the show, let's play probably a little bit of what it looks like, including the visuals. Now, I guess this piece works kind of differently because there's, unlike in a lot of the others, there's some historical context to it as well. And the way the human brain works, it tries to make sense of things. And you just hint at it very, very briefly, and then it's over again. It's like, I mean, our ADD generation is kind of used to that, but the people that really pay the big dollars for the concert tickets, how do they deal with it? Are they going like, come on, play the damn song?
Yes.
Most of the people don't recognize in the beginning. I think it's
In the beginning, though.
Yeah,
But
it takes a lot of time. Yeah.
After they recognize what this is, of course they get frustrated. And sometimes, like mostly like in Latin countries like Italy or Spain, I was sort of forced, to play the whole song. So, I didn't, but I felt a lot of pressure. Play it from the audience. So I was almost going to play the whole song. Then I stopped it, and that created more frustration. So maybe just play only fragments. That would be better.
You seem to quite enjoy frustrating the audience in that sense.
No, that's not my intention.
But I mean, nevertheless, for those who wondering like what are they on about, it's your first soundtrack scoring job that was hinted in there, right?
Yes, very first soundtrack, yes.
Yeah. And the movie was called Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
And there's rumors you got that job because by that time you were more of a pop star, but you got the job of actually doing the music by being pretty brave and courageous.
Well, unfortunately, the director of this film, Mr. Nagisa Oshima, passed away this year, early this year. But when I got this offer from him, he asked me to act in the film first. So, of course, in my mind, I said yes. Of course, I would. But then before I literally said yes, I got an idea and said, let me do music. And he said, of course you can. Then I said yes. Okay, I would do acting in your film. I don't know why I said that, but it worked.
It did kind of well, judging from the amount of soundtrack work you got later, right?
Mm.
Oh. And seeing that was your first experience of writing a soundtrack, of which you did so many more, what took longer, the actual acting or writing the music?
Writing music took longer. The whole shooting took only maybe 2 months, and I was lucky I got 3 months to make music. It's very unusual for soundtrack composers to have that long period of time to make music.
Yeah, rumor has it that for another movie that you actually won the Oscar for, you did not have that much time, right?
I had only 2 weeks.
And that was after haggling with an Italian
Yes.
who only wanted to give you how much time?
Well, I had 2 weeks, 1 week in Tokyo to write music and record, and then I brought all the materials to London, which they had a production. Then next day of my arrival, I had to go to Abbey Road to record the actual music. But at that time in the 80s, we didn't have good communication between London and Tokyo. So when I arrived in London, the film was edited differently. So the music length wouldn't fit. So I had to rewrite overnight to prepare the recording at the Abbey Road the next day. And we didn't have a computer to recalculate musical tempo and the sequence, the time sequence. So I had to use my pocket dentaku. Dentaku is a pocket calculator.
You should have called Carsten. He can.
Yes. Dentaku.
I somehow have the feeling that working with a Japanese director first and then with Bertolucci is a little different, maybe.
Yes. Very different. Very different. Well, not only Mr. Oshima was Japanese, but he is that kind of film director, who gave us almost total freedom. So he didn't give me any strict direction or something. Just he let me do free, whatever. And during the 3 months of recording, he just showed up once and listened to everything I got that time, and then he left. No complaints or no fixes, no revisions or anything. But working with an Italian film director was totally different. So first time I was at Abbey Road in a very big room with the British string orchestra, and the first time Petrucci said, "Where are the verses? Where are the verses?" Like trumpets and trombones and horns. And I explained, well, we will have brasses tomorrow. We will overdub brasses tomorrow, and we record strings first today. No, that's impossible. And he didn't understand overdubbing at that time. And also he shouted, "Where's the big screen?" In old days, they had musicians had a big screen in the studio, and you know that 3, 2, 1, and music starts, and the conductor will direct according to that film, the signs on the film, right? And the musicians had to react whatever the mood of the sequence. So he shouted. So he intended to have the big screen in the studio for musicians to watch the film. So the 1 hour later, the big screen was brought to the studio, but obviously no musicians watched the film because we had the click. So we didn't need that big screen, but he is happy. Of course, the Bertolucci was happy. Anyway.
Well, scoring for film, I guess, is something a lot of people in here would love to do themselves at some stage. And I want to probably pick one scene, and just assuming that most people would know the general theme, would like to know what you did in order to fit it to a different screen. Oops. It's only 1 minute, so I'll try to pick an example that's rather easy, and let's hope the syncing works better this time. Can you recall how you approached that? Because it's definitely one of the movie scenes where the soundtrack works very different than what you expect it to be, and it's there's a really interesting friction of the visual content and what you hear, and how that works with the rest what you're doing in the movie.
I don't know. I didn't have any theory or anything, any method. I just followed my instinct. It's strange that, if...
But in a good way. I mean,
yeah? If I have to make music now, I would write totally different music, and it might not be as good as this. I don't know. But it sounds like it sounds like a copy and paste it to me. It could be something else. Like it could be some fragments of pop music or something.
But there's still hints of the theme in there, but just very lightly.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, my intention was to create another story, different from the story we see in this film, but another kind of storytelling structure by music. So of course, I used the method of a leitmotif, Richard Wagner's leitmotif. So I wrote like 4 different themes for 4 different characters, and combined them. But that's probably the only method I used at the time.
Was it different later to write for something where you're not one of the characters?
Well, it's hard to say. The main engine I wrote this music was my acting, because it was so bad. So as I almost fell into the floor when I saw first time on my acting. And that's before I started making music. So that was the major engine to write music.
Speaking of engines, I mean, this war has clearly a very strong humanitarian message as well. You seem to devote a lot of time of your work to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're active in, I take it, anti-nuclear.
Yeah.
It's like, do you do that aside from the music, or do you try to combine them in a way?
Well, like more than 10 years ago, I became very conscious about environmental issues. Then many people ask me, why don't you make kind of eco music, or how would it be possible to write the eco music? And I've been thinking about eco music, and I cannot write eco music. It's well, it would be too new agey kind of music, which I don't like. Because sometimes we go to, when we have to go to the dental clinic, they play kind of very cheesy, easy eco music, and I hate it. So so I can write eco kind of music, right? But my theory is there will be a kind of eco-conscious thrash metal band. They don't have to change their music, but they can change the source of the power. From fossil fuel to environmental renewable energy. So, I mean,
People should probably get into bikes instead of the mosh pits and power the amps that way. And then,
So simply the music or culture and infrastructure are two different things to me.
We're actually getting some signals about being short on time, but what can people expect from what we will see tomorrow?
I mean, the music and the little video we saw, I mean, give you maybe a little impression, but it's a very simple setup. It's basically piano, me electronics, and we have a screen behind us what will provide the visuals. It's not a big rock setup, or it's not so. Actually, it has very clear and easy to understand elements. Yeah.
I found it always really interesting how the place determines especially your combined show. If you just think of the different places it happened in Barcelona, for example, when you play it in that open amphitheater, how different it is to that really beautiful hall as well. I mean, they're all good venues, but it's extremely different for you as a listener to take it in. How different is it for you to play there in these different environments?
Yes, I think one aspect is, of course, the connection to the audience. Like some venues are great. You really feel the audience, and the audience can see you better, and the energy in the room is simply working really from the beginning. But for instance, we had on our last tour, we had one location where I never experienced something like that, where I played a sound, and I heard a different sound coming back. And I said, okay, can somebody please switch off this speaker sitting in the ceiling there? I said, and I had a discussion for 1 hour. I said, there must be a speaker up there. they said, no, there's nothing. There's nothing. And then we looked in the venue and we realized was a very like a decorative element of what the architect puts in some plexiglass. What was very specifically ordered in a circular. What bounced the sound back in such a weird way that it all was like sounding like a Mickey Mouse voice. When I was sending a bass drum out, it made like.
It's a Düsseldorf?
Düsseldorf, yeah. Yeah, this tonal. And I had a long discussion with the guys, with the PA, and I said, no, I don't believe you. It's not acoustically. There's something broken in your speakers. Some speakers broken. So
but actually, that's short delays which create that kind of sound. Right?
Yeah. The weird thing was that I on stage could hear that sound on my position. Ryuichi not so much anymore. Anybody in the audience not. Only me.
So you had a great time.
And I really had to laugh during the concerts because I heard always this kind of Mickey Mouse imitation of my bass drum. And then
a strange punishment.
Yes.
I guess we would love, despite the time, can we take one or two questions maybe? And there's also one track. We strongly, obviously, as always, encourage you to research both gentlemen's material further at your own leisure. But here's a little hint of something that you might know, well sampled. And let's hope YouTube is better this time. Do we have time for one question? Does it work? Two? Maybe? Question, audience? Someone?
Thank you so much for being here and sharing with us today. So I was wondering if there was one thing that you guys wish that you would leave behind when you're gone, based upon your musical experiences, what would that be?
You know, we bring the easy ones at the end. Yeah.
I guess, you see a collaboration by two men which have totally different backgrounds. It's almost two different genres we came from. And still, we could collaborate and make something we can enjoy. That's great for me. I don't know.
Yeah, but of course for me too. But I think it's not so much that you think about what you leave behind. I think it's rather you look forward always, and then you keep forgetting what you did. Actually, what actually is better, because it gives you energy to face new things and be curious, and I think that's maybe. And I think all the 5 albums we did, I always very much enjoyed looking forward to the next one. But you could continue endlessly in a way, but you want to make it interesting. So sometimes you make it more difficult, or yeah. So I think it's more look forward than rather back. Yeah.
Yeah, more we've done, the possibility gets narrower, right?
Yeah,
we didn't want to repeat our past. So.
Yeah. I mean, we did 5 albums, and I think they are. We consider them as a circle, a body of work, and we both want to continue. And we wrote some new pieces. We play maybe tomorrow.
Yeah.
But
after we finished the 5th album, we've been really looking for something big jump, totally another level of something we could do. Yeah. And we're still waiting.
Waiting for inspiration.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you did quite good for the first 5 albums, so we're really looking forward to the next ones. And but looking back for at least the last 2 hours, we'd like to thank you very much, and please give it up for Carsten Nicolai and Sakamoto-sama.